Let the record reflect that Councilman Vieira has joined us.
Mentezna, Tampa, Florida. One of the things I've said in being here is that this city council, very insensitive to the needs, the concerns of African people. We're 26% of this population, and we don't get any respect at all as being 26% of the population. I want to say, when you've been victimized, you see and feel life differently. When you've been violently raped, you view sexual relationships differently. When you have been a victim of child molestation or child abuse, your adult confidence is diminished. When you possess black skin and experience a life of racial discrimination, your mental receptors are very sensitive to both small and big signs of racial insensitivity. There are 2 drawings in this city council building in plain view that need to be removed. Not a true reflection of the population, but it is an accurate reflection of the city's policies. African people are disrespected internationally. That has been the case for the past 622 years. In 2022, in the most civilized country in the world, an 18-year-old white man in Buffalo, New York, surrounded by opportunities and luxuries, can fixate his imagination on identifying, locating, and violently exterminating African people. We saw that scenario repeated itself in South Carolina when Dylan Roof, one would think that is an exemplification of hatred, but in reality it's the bottom end of racial hatred. The people that are responsible for carrying out racial hatred are doing so through official policies, laws, legislation, and programs. The people that have been in the forefront of committing genocide against African people are the ones that are sitting in government offices and private corporate boardrooms. The people that are in the forefront of eliminating the African off the planet Earth are the white policymakers and white lawmakers that disproportionately incarcerate Africans for victimless crimes, forcefully dispossess African people of our property, our cars, our bicycles, our land, our homes, our apartments, our places of residency through gentrification, our history through slavery, our future through lack of reparations, and our humanity through programs that are racially motivated and racially offensive. The people that smile in our faces each and every day are the same people that are responsible for dispossessing us of everything the United Nations and other organizations identified as standard life necessities. The city of Tampa has an eloquent way of deceiving African people. Our concerns, our reality are never attended to. We African people in this city have been moving backwards since the formation of this city. The white elected officials sitting right here in this city council have to bear some that blame and some of that responsibility for the racial disparities that exist in this city. We're saying, and I'm saying, that this city council have to take African people concerns more seriously and have to reverse some of the policies that it's had and have to look at reparations more seriously for African people.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels.
Good morning, Council. My name is Kerry West, Tampa, Florida resident, Ybor City. I'm here today to tell you about a great opportunity that we have in the state of Florida and right here in Central Florida. I'm here to ask and request that we have an opportunity to bring in a World Pride conference, and it will be here in Central Florida. World Pride opportunities right now are requested and have been offered to the cities of Spain, Madrid, and also to Montreal, London, New York City, and across the world. In fact, in 2 years, it's going to be in Taiwan, it's going to be in China. It's gone through the United Nations, and the approval of going through the United Nations and saying that we're going to have a pride, a World Pride organization in the world, that is great. This opportunity is coming forward in 2026. My request is to have the Helping Orlando Pride get the opportunity to have the bid to have World Pride in 2026. That in 2000, we went through there and had the big offering of New York City having World Pride, and that brought in 6 million people. This one here, cities across Florida and across all of the counties are offering to bring in, and be the 10th anniversary of the Pulse nightclub, memorial, and museum. There would be opportunity to opening up the doors to the world to see. They are anticipating that this will be 10 times more people coming into Orlando than visiting Mount Vernon. If that is unbelievable, that is something unbelievable. But right now, the requesting is just a letter of support to bring in, and as we go down, as a team from Tampa Pride will be going to make this decision and doing the bidding process down in Mexico, down to La de Guajara this year, and with all the world leaders of Pride around the world. I would request that we get a letter of support from Tampa. We're getting a letter of support from the mayor. We're getting it from all the major cities of Florida, and I'm excited about that. As a board member of World Pride on the scholarship committee, we are bringing in new people from around the world and adjusting and making human rights a positive thing and having it to Central Florida. This is going to be bringing a lot of new events to Tampa, as we are going to have to accommodate the many, many millions of people that will be coming. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Maniscalco.
May I make a motion then that the chairman draft a letter of support for everything that Carrie West has requested in support of World Pride?
We have a motion made by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilman Miranda. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Council. My name is Robin Lockett. I have a concern. I replayed the meeting from last week, right, when your attorney came up to give you the information around the Tenants Advocacy Office. And it bothers me that when that presentation was done, all the duties of that office was watered down to make you think that that office is just the hotline, or to make you think that that office is less than what it is, just taking phone calls and redirecting people, right? That office is much more than that. In this time, again, we have an opportunity to make the office what we want, because we want, when that office is created, that we change people's lives. We help people, right? We direct them, but we also enforce things. So I would ask that I sent information maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago to each one of you in regards to what Miami does and what our proposal is in regards to what we're looking for, right? Please look at that. If you don't have counsel that's going to come and present information correctly to you with all of the facts, because like I said, and I printed what she wrote, what she presented on the screen, and it just bothers me that it's watered down to appear something else, that is something else, and it's not. So please take the time, and it's a shame that you rely on counsel to present this information to you, and you're not getting all the information. Now, if that counsel is not familiar with that type of law or whatever, because even when she indicated that she called somebody, she called the office, why not pull the actual ordinance and get that information from the actual ordinance? It's only been up for a month. So, and that's not the only time that there's a difference in regards to what can be done and what you guys are receiving as to what can't be done. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Lockett.
Good morning, Council. My name is Bobby Creighton. I'm a resident of Ybor Heights. What I wanted to talk about today is tangentially related to item number 3, but I figured I'd speak now just to give other people time if they really want to focus on that. And what I want to talk to you today about is not to cry over spilt milk or rehash something that's already been done and can't be changed, but I want to introduce you to a project that I think is illustrative of some deficiencies in the way that the procedures unfold and some of the ways that the zoning falls short. and also the land use falls short of meeting the needs of people in East Tampa and in neighborhoods around mine. So I want to start by introducing you to an overview. I hope this is on here. I got this on. Perfect. So this is the East Tampa CRA. The East Tampa CRA, the purpose is to use tax dollars generated in that area to uplift the community, the people who are already living there. CRAs are created in areas where there's substandard or inadequate structures, a shortage of affordable housing, or inadequate infrastructure. This location also happens to be in the boundaries of the envisioned Tampa Center City Plan. It's a 2-mile radius around downtown. The vision statement for that plan is that Center City Tampa will be a community of livable places, connected people, and collaborative progress. I want us to remember that as I move through here. So that's where it is in the city. I also want to zoom in a little bit more closely on the site itself. Here we see Florabraska intersecting with Nebraska, which is where the project site is right here on the corner. The reason I include this slide is just to illustrate some of the infrastructure improvements that are going on along Florabraska. We see there's protected bike lanes, improved crosswalks, improved turning. There's bulb outs here for safer pedestrian travel along the sidewalks and prevention from interference from vehicles. I'm running short on time. Let me introduce you to the project. This is the project itself. It's 3-story townhomes. There are only 5 of them.
May I stop you at this moment?
Yes,
Just
sir.
1 second, Mr. Massey. Has this already been submitted? Is this?
I do
going-
not know, and so
It has. It's gone through the review process.
has it
I'm
been
just trying
already
to-
been presented to this body though?
It did not need to be presented to this body because it's
Okay.
a staff level review. I just wanted to give a case study in a
Okay.
way
I
to kind of
just-
illustrate.
As long as it's not
Ourselves.
something pending before them. If it is,
No, it's not. I'm sorry. I
then
didn't
they're
mean
not
to.
supposed to be considering things outside of the hearing. So.
Please give this gentleman a minute.
Sure, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to ruffle any feathers there. I'm sorry. So to run it short on time here, this is the lot itself. You can see it's not a huge lot. There is commercial development on the opposite side and on the catty corner side. Let me reintroduce the site plan here. I think this is deficient for several reasons. First of all, it doesn't match the density that's needed in this area. It's 5 townhomes that are 3 stories. Imagine what this could be if we really maximize the full potential of this site in terms of places for people to live when we're in a housing crisis. The second thing I'd like to point out and how this is related to item number 3 on the agenda is there is no mixed use. VM Ybor made an official statement and sent it into to the department going through this process that they opposed this project precisely for that reason. They wanted mixed use on this corner. If you look back at the corner here, I think that is not an unfair ask. This is a site, it's on a busy corner. There's commercial around the area, and there hasn't been much development in terms of commercial opportunities in VM Ybor or on Nebraska for that matter. So what I'm asking you today, since I'm running out of time, is to please consider looking at the comprehensive plan and how we can implement better standards or perhaps more clear language in the plan so that sites like this are fully optimized and the community can really benefit from the development that's coming into their neighborhood, to preserve affordability and economic development into the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilman Goose.
Ms. Travis, I believe the East Tampa CRA is getting ready to do an overlay, is that correct?
Sorry.
I believe the East Tampa CRA is getting ready to revise that overlay.
Yes, that's correct.
So you hearing what the gentleman was saying, so I think we need to take a look at those options because he's right about Nebraska Avenue, 22nd.
And the overlay would cover the things that he brought up in his presentation to you. Some of, not the use of, it's not going to be requirements of the use, but it will contemplate design standards. We'll make the presentation to you, but we are in the process of doing the East Tampa overlay now.
All right, thank you.
Is there anyone else in council chambers that wishes to make public comment at this time?
I'm good. Yeah, it's time for the public comment. I don't have a whole lot of comments for today, but I do want to read some scripture from the book of 2 Chronicles 13 and 14. I wish y'all pay close attention to it. That way we can get some things done through the Spirit of God. God said this, if I shut up heaven, that there be no rain, or if I command the locust to devour the land, or if I send pestilence among my people. But this is what God's telling us. If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked way, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal the land. Ain't that something? That's how good God is to all of us. But we don't want to respect God look like in no kind of way. First I want to thank the city council for coming over, checking out my resident museum and everything. And although they didn't give me no concrete word of what they're going to do by the people blocking up my street, but one thing about it, God knows, and he will take care of all of us, especially his children. And I'm saying this here to say this. We act like we don't care, but God cares, and we care about God for what he's doing for us right now. God is the one that made it possible for us to be here this morning, and we must tell him thank you. God is the one that put food on our table, and we ain't got sense enough to tell him thank you. God is the one that clothes us, and we don't have sense enough to thank him. God is the one that gives this automobile with the gas is extremely high. They don't want you to go be able to get on your job. Everything we do comes from God. God is blessing us right now, and we've seen the disrespecting. But I want to tell y'all something. At those scriptures that I just read, God said, but if my people, which are called by my name, seek my face and pray and turn from their wicked way, then God said, I will heal the land. The land is in an uproar. The land needs to be healed. But we don't care about the land being healed. And we don't care nothing about ourselves being healed. But we still must give God the glory for everything that he's doing for us right now. First, people, I got to tell you, I thank God for this day. And if there be a tomorrow, I thank him in advance. God bless all of y'all.
Councilman Goods.
Mr. Pastor Williams, let me say thank you for allowing me to visit with you last week. It was an honor and a pleasure to go in that former palace of Allen Temple. My brother was funeralized in that facility back in '87. So it brought back memories when I went to the upstairs portion of the church. But let me say the artifacts and relics that you have in that church are priceless. Some of the things I saw dating back to segregation, the photos and just some of the trinkets that were in there, they're just priceless. And I was amazed to see those things in there. And I know Mr. Burton of our central CRA sent me an email about getting with you and seeing what we can do, some issues with the church. I know about the parking, so he's going to be looking at with his staff to kind of work on those issues. But I just want to say thank you for allowing me to see what was in there, because what is in there, truly people need to see. And if other councilmen get a chance to go by there, I'm just telling you what's in there. It's amazing. So thank you for blessing me to see that, sir.
Thank you, Brother Good. I appreciate you all coming, and I know you all was very excited about what you're seeing. But I try to put the truth out and let the people be able to see the evidence of the truth, whether they think it didn't happen or whether they think it happened. But I got a lot of stuff down there in that museum, and we're glad They break out my windows and everything. Seems like the cold and folks really want to put it all on me. But the thing about it, we got to do God's will regardless. And I thank God for allowing me to be able to do his will. For you all that didn't come down there to check out the museum, or didn't see the church, I guarantee y'all missed the tree. Because we got things that really happen. And it happened because we allow it to happen. But America's supposed to be a great nation, ain't that right? That's what y'all told me. If y'all didn't tell me, y'all fooling me there. America is a great nation, but America disrespects a lot of his people, his citizens, that's what you call the United States. They disrespect me and a lot of other people. But God bless y'all anyhow.
Thank you. Anyone else in chambers that wishes to give public comment?
Agenda items or?
No, this is not agenda, this is just general public comment. All right, let's go online. Again,
morning.
the people that will be speaking online, this is for general public comment. If you wish to make comments during the agenda items, we will ask you to wait until that time. Thank you. The first person, Camila Soto.
Good morning, Chair. Camila Santo is not logged on. Out of the 9 registered speaker for general public comment, we only have 9 logged on. I mean, 2, sorry. The first one is Stephanie Pointer. So Stephanie, if you can hear me, please unmute yourself. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Ms. Pointer.
I'm going to hold my comments until the agenda items, except for CFI. I hope you kibosh that one. Other than that, I'm going to hold my comments.
Was that Stephanie Pointer? Okay, didn't sound like Miss, sounded like the stream was.
Yes, I have COVID, sir.
Okay. Who is next online?
The next one is Michelle Henoyer. Michelle, if you can hear me, please unmute yourself. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Ms. Canoyer, are you there? You need to unmute yourself, please. Ms. Canoyer, are you there?
She's on. She just need to unmute herself.
Ms. Canoyer, could you please unmute yourself? You are self-muted.
You may want to announce that. Apparently, Ms. Canoyer, you're self-muted. We can't unmute you from here.
All right, are those the only 2 speakers that we have at this time?
We actually have Carol Ann Bennett. Carol, if you can hear me, please unmute yourself. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Let's go to Ms. Bennett.
Hi, my name's Carol Ann Bennett, lifelong resident of Tampa. I'm going to go ahead and speak on my items now because I have commitments later in the day. I'd like to first talk about the mixed use that Stephen Benson's going to present to you. Stephen met with Stephanie Pointer and myself for like 2 hours, and we went over his plan very, very carefully and asked a lot of questions. And I want to say that I'm very pleased with the plan. I think it'll accomplish a lot. The way things stand now, a developer can qualify for something as quote unquote mixed use, and the mixed use could be the size of my bedroom closet. And this solves that problem, I think, in a very good way. So I'm hoping that we can get behind this and support this. The other thing I want to talk about is the Tampa Heights, what they're asking for. I think this is very good. There's a lot of work that's gone into this. as you saw earlier when Mr. Creighton spoke, better things can be done, more can be done, better designs can be made that accomplish the goals and preserve the neighborhoods and give each neighborhood its own character, its own flavor, its own identity, and not have that identity washed away by these generic cookie cutter, the highest profit developments. So I'm really hoping that you support what Tampa Heights is trying to achieve. And I guess that's all I have to say. I hope you guys have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pointer. I mean, Ms. Bennett. Thank you. Ms. Canoia, are you there? We'll try you one more time. All right, let's move forward. Councilman Vieira, I don't know if you had heard or not, but we have continued items 1 and 2.
Okay.
Till September, and we are going to hear 6 and 7 first, and we will be opening them up together.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Feely, we are opening items 6 and 7, file number E 2021-A, Chapter 27, and CM 22-72875.
Thank you, Council. I did just want to ask briefly, did you want to handle number 4? Ms. Bennett just mentioned it, or Ms. Pointer just mentioned it, and I thought that we were going to see if that item needed to move forward this morning or not as well. If not, we will wait till it comes in order.
Do I hear any objection from council? Okay, let's open item number 4 then, as per the request of Ms. Feely. That is file number E 2021-A, Chapter 27.
Sure, just have the record clear, please make a motion to one of the council members so we can't get that we didn't do it properly.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
Motion made by Councilman Vieira, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor?
Aye.
Any objections?
I believe this was a motion made by Councilman Maniscalco in relation to the comp plan amendments from 2016 for Rattlesnake Point and the impact on CFI. Given our report related to CFI last week and their sale and relocation, we were not sure if this item needed to continue to be discussed.
Considering, what was brought up last week, I think the point is moot, as long as not, the deal doesn't fall through, but at this point, I think everything is moving forward, so I wouldn't, I don't see the need unless any other council member brings it up to discuss it any further.
I just wanted to make sure if we were not gonna proceed with that item today, that if there were anyone here in the audience that wanted to speak on it, that, council took action and we weren't waiting, because item 6 is gonna take a little bit, and I'm ready to start when you are.
Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak to agenda item number 4? And I see that there was 2 people that were wanting to speak to this agenda item, but since Councilman Maniscalco has stated it is a moot point, Ms. Pointer and Guerriere, are you there on the line? Do you still wish to speak to this agenda item?
No, I'm good. The property's been sold. They've already closed on it, so there's not a whole lot of backing up.
Thank you. Ms. Guerriere online?
Hi, Chair. The second person did not log on.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councilman Maniscalco. Thank you, Ms. Feely.
Okay,
So 4
well-
is done. Finished, excuse me.
We have to make a motion to take it off the agenda.
Yeah, please.
Remove item number 4.
Motion made by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilwoman Hurtak. All in favor?
Aye.
Is there any objection? Thank you, Ms. Feely. Now we can go to agenda items number 6 and 7.
Great, thank you very much. Abby Feely, Deputy Administrator, Development and Economic Opportunity. We have item number 6 for you this morning. And this is a discussion that's made up of a couple components. And if I could go to the next slide, please. And we have it broken down for you. Next slide, please. Okay, we have it broken down for you in housing affordability, the city-initiated code amendments, and the privately initiated code amendments. Before I get started this morning, Ms. Johns just joined. She wanted to reply to the comments that were made from tenant advocacy by Ms. Lockett this morning, if you wouldn't have an issue with that, since we are going to be talking about housing affordability and some of our new undertakings that we're bringing toward you this morning. I would defer to her for just a few moments.
This will be just for clarification.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, Rebecca Johns, Assistant City Attorney. I just wanted to clarify regarding the ordinance that was brought up earlier. Obviously, I did review the ordinance before I presented my presentation. I summarized the ordinance into my bullet points, but I wanted to go ahead and I'll distribute this to you all, but I wanted to show everyone the actual bullet points from the ordinance as to what the office in Miami is tasked with doing per ordinance. I do want to clarify that what I discussed was what they've actually been doing based on conversations with the people doing it. But just for clarification, I would like to go through the bullet points, if that's okay. So they are tasked with coordinating with and referring matters and complaints to federal, state, and local agencies or organizations, including legal and other advocacy organizations that may have the authority to.
Excuse me, if you are going through the bullet points,
We
can
can't
you
see
zoom
them.
out?
Oh, sorry. Just
Push
what?
There you go.
Sorry.
There you go.
Referring matters related to Section 8 programs and other federally subsidized housing to the Public Housing and Community Development Department or successor department. Publishing and disseminating information and educational materials relating to this article, including to landlords to promote their participation in existing affordable housing programs. Conducting trainings and outreach for tenants and landlords at a minimum of 4 times per year. Serving as an advisor to the county mayor on housing-related policy matters, assisting the county mayor to secure resources to support tenant legal advocacy, including grants, developing resources for landlords and tenants to promote housing stability, serving as liaison with community and professional groups representing tenants and landlords, performing such other administrative duties related to the Miami-Dade County Tenants Bill of Rights as may be assigned by the county mayor or the county mayor's designee, and performing such other duties, functions, powers, and responsibilities to further the purposes of this article. So I just wanted to clarify if any of you have any questions or have any further direction or comments regarding us developing this office, let me know.
Councilwoman.
Yes, ma'am.
Could you move that down a little bit? Yes, the conducting training and outreach for tenants. I didn't see that as part of ours.
Yes, because that hasn't happened. They haven't done that. And so my presentation to you was what they were actually doing.
Okay.
So that's why that wasn't one of the actual bullet points. But what that is going to be putting information on their website.
I think that's a great idea, and I think ours should include that as well. The publishing and dissemination of information and educational materials also seems like a great idea, and securing resources through grants. And I know technically that would be part of what the city does, but to actually explicitly have it in our ordinance would, to me, be something I would like to see.
Any other comments or questions? Councilman Vieira.
And thank you for that presentation or showing us that. You know, I think the main issue, and I know I think we all agree on this, is making sure, as I don't know if it was Councilman Maniscalco or Goods who said this, about making sure that this has, I don't know if it's robust with teeth, whatever term you want to call it, and we'll look at that. There were some other things. I met with Ms. Lockett and some other folks from Florida Rising yesterday. There were some other ideas that were put forward that may not be applicable to this, but I want to do research on things with the Tenants Bill of Rights with regards to having a potential, I'll call it a statute of limitations on certain prior evictions and different issues, advising tenants of their prospective rights with regards to retaliation-based rights from the property owner, et cetera. Nothing that's directly relatable to this, but I think the main issue, and I know, and I believe we're all going to get there, is just making sure that this is something that is robust, and I'm sure that we're going to get there. So, but just thank you for your work. We appreciate you. Thank you, ma'am.
Sure.
Councilman Carlson.
Yeah, two things real fast. One is, I would ask the administration that as issues go through city council, we're using the staff who ultimately report to the mayor. I would ask the administration, if you have any questions or comments or problems with something that we're proposing, call us, or ask staff to call us and express those concerns. A line in an editorial over the weekend implied that the mayor's office probably called the editorial board of the Times and said, we don't really like this, so can you put a dagger in it? And then if you read the press release that went out a couple days ago about the mayor's hotline, it looks like it's at cross purposes with city council. I don't know about the rest of you, but I got a bunch of calls when that press release went out, and then when the mayor had the press conference. I know at least one of my colleagues attended the press conference, but I saw in the media that the mayor's office was asked questions about whether this conflicts with city council. The public is tired of fights between the mayor's office and city council, and I would just ask everybody, if there's a difference of opinion, let's work this out behind the scenes or even in these chambers. But once we vote on something, it's not a time to have political jabs in the media. It doesn't serve anybody. It just confuses the public, upsets the public, and we need to try to work together. The second thing is that to Councilmember Hurtak, I don't know if we can make motions now, but if you wanted to make a motion to replace this list with the one that we gave them the other day, I would second it or support it. Thank you.
Councilman Goods.
You know, I supported the ordinance on the last go-round, but I was clear, I don't think it has the teeth that the community is really looking for. Making sure that hotline, getting information to people in the right place and making sure they get the services they need. I'm grateful that we put a foot forward to do something like that, but I just want to make sure that this is going to work. And I didn't know that we didn't meet with the folks that were, the community that was even advocating it. And sometimes we need to meet with the people to make sure we're on board. Council can put stuff forward, but it's the people that bring this stuff to us a lot of times because they're the ones that are hurting and suffering, and making sure you have engagement. So if Ms. Hurtak decides to do that, I think that we need to maybe just revisit with some of the groups, Florida Rising, some of the others who are asking for certain things to see how we can implement those points that they're looking for. I think engagement is good. That way all bases are covered. So if Ms. Hurtak puts something on the floor, I'll ask that it be included, that the community with Florida Rising and some other groups be involved in that process to make sure that this council and this city has really, really looked at what we're doing and making sure it's going to have teeth to work.
I do think that the council has directed the legal department to move forward with an ordinance that would come back, I think, August 4th. So I think that's the time there will be a public hearing at that point in time to get some public input. Obviously, I think Ms. Johns will be working with the administration and with Florida Rising and other interested folks in the development of that ordinance. There are limits to what the city can do, obviously, but we will be working with those folks before we bring back the ordinance.
So I would suggest that
I
Ms.
believe
Johns,
that's the date, isn't it?
if you said she's going to give them, I suggest she gets with them before August 4th. That way it comes back, we're good to go.
And that's the plan. Last week, we were only asked to come and report on what Miami was doing. So that's why we had not met with anyone.
All right, thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Thank you for allowing me to clarify.
I'm sorry, Councilwoman Hurtak, did you have any questions or comments?
Oh, I was still looking at that.
Oh.
Anyway, thank you. So yes, I mean, I would make a motion, but if this is what you're coming back, this is what we'd like to see.
And I'll hand this out to all of you so that you have the ordinance.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Feely.
Thank you. Thank you, Council. Okay, let's go back to item 6. And now I know I'm in control, so we're ready to rock we are excited to be here this morning for this workshop with you to go over our ongoing efforts related to housing affordability, as well as a set of city-initiated text amendments that include a few amendments which are relevant to housing, as well as a few cleanup items. As we work through each of the agenda items today, we will be asking for feedback and action by council. We know that you don't normally take action, but in order to accelerate the concepts that we're presenting to you today, we're going to ask for that feedback and a motion on whether or not you're in favor of these concepts moving forward. We don't, on a lot of them, we're going to talk through concepts with you today. We don't have the specific language that would go into the code, but they are roughly code amendments that would then come back to you. So if you say, yes, we're in favor of this moving forward, we're going to go back, we're going to get to work, we're going to bring back those specifics to you in the language that would go into the code. And we would work, so over the next 60 to 90 days, we would develop, much of the language is already developed. We would clean that up. We would then work with our stakeholders, and we would bring back final concepts to you for transmittal to the Planning Commission and ultimately adoption on the code. So the discussion we're going to have this morning on item 6 is going to start with housing affordability, and we're going to talk about affordable housing as a specified use, our bonus density, which you all have heard much about over the past year or so, and then I will turn it over to Stephen. He's going to talk to you about accessory dwelling units. We then do have several city code amendments, city initiated, and then we will talk about the privately initiated code amendments. As you know, we're in our final cycle of those. They did terminate. January was the last cycle that's in. We have 4 of those for you today, and then we have 2 more that will be coming to you, which will be East Tampa and 1 additional privately initiated by Tyler Hudson that will come back to you in either September or October. We're going to talk to you about that today and when you would like to see that, but that would close out what is currently on the books as the final privately initiated amendments. This slide I have for you here shows you on the left side 4 of the mayor's 5 T3 initiatives: the housing affordability, community-centric services, infrastructure, mobility, sustainability, and resilience. What I've done is on the left side, I've created couple other icons to show you as we work through today's presentation how these concepts impact cost, accountability, time, and transparency. So you'll see as we talk through these concepts, they'll have the little icons down at the bottom, and as we've thought about them and how they impact our city, those will be available for you. So housing affordability, many of you are familiar with the House Bill 1339 that was signed in July 1st, 2020, and allows for affordable housing to be located in any zoning district, any land use category. And some local governments across the state of Florida, not many, have implemented this in a number of different ways. The way we're going to talk to you about this morning is creating affordable housing as a specified use. So our code right now has 28 specified uses, and they range from rooming houses and kennels and open storage. When the medical marijuana dispensaries came in, those became a specified use. And specified uses are permitted uses, but they have conditions or regulations that speak to how they operate. So our request would be to create affordable housing as a specified use. What does that mean? That means that we would set up a set of criteria that would allow for projects that are seeking to do at least 80% affordable housing to be able to proceed at an administrative level and come together as a development agreement that would come before you. It would not require these projects to continue down the road as PDs or general zonings, and it would open up land inventory to create new opportunities for housing. It would also allow us to incentivize that affordable housing by allowing for reduced parking requirements. We're looking at 1 space per unit. We've approved design exceptions for West River and other projects that have come to the city at a 0.8 space. We also do not require guest for that, so that would allow more land to go into green space, and you wouldn't have to have as large of a site to create these projects because you are not required the magnitude of parking. You're not required the magnitude of green space. We're looking at green space requirements going from 350 a unit down to 100 square foot a unit. And also, if they were to aggregate that green space into a functional area on the project, a playground, a walking trail, something like that, we could even incentivize it more and make it 75 square feet a unit. We would also require the minimum 50-year affordability period to ensure that projects that are going through and receiving these incentives are committing to 50 years of affordability within the city. And then what we would do is we would bring the development agreement that would contain the conditions of development and a concept site plan to you for adoption through a public hearing process. But it wouldn't be the same 9 to 12 month process that a PD is taking. It wouldn't be the same, as far as having to it would shorten that time, it would streamline the process, and it would incentivize people to undertake these types of projects. This concept does consider a 20% market, so 80% minimum affordable. If you do 100% affordable, that's great. But a lot of the projects we're seeing, most of the ones in West River, are 80-20. That allows the developer to recoup some of those costs, but more than half of the project remains affordable. The benefits and opportunities, and I did want to just give you one example on this. I ran the numbers on a 100-unit apartment complex, 51 bedrooms and 52 bedrooms. And under standard zoning, that would be required 150 parking spaces. Under this scenario, it would be required 100 spaces. So right there, where we see developers investing in structured parking garages that are costing $15,000 to $20,000 a space, that would be an incredible cost savings to them for those 50 spaces. It would also allow them to put that money into other aspects of the project. That same 100-unit apartment complex right now would be required 3/4 of an acre of green space. A lot of our properties aren't even 3/4 of an acre, but in this case, going down to the 100 square foot, it would be less than 1/4 of an acre that would be required to go to green space. So this allows for projects to happen on smaller parcels and still meet our continuing needs of creating inventory. Some of the benefits and opportunities, it does, as I just said, increase the land inventory available. It reduces the requirements for going through a rezoning or special use. It allows for appropriate parking, green space, and supplemental regulations for the use. It achieves that 50-year minimum affordability period, and it would be implemented through the development agreement, which would be approved by City Council. So this reduces time and money spent on the entitlement process and allows us to get our inventory into construction in a quicker way. I know I spoke quickly. If you are in favor of supporting this code modification to create this classification for affordable housing, we would request a motion in favor. I will turn it over for public comment. I think we're going to take public comment on each of these concepts. And then we will take action, and then we'll go on to the next item.
And thank you very much, Ms. Feely.
And I can take any questions, sorry.
Let me make this statement first. This is a little unusual because we are talking about so much today. So if people that are online will just bear with us for their public comment, this will run smoothly. So, Councilman Maniscalco.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your hard work and your team. With this presentation, we're in an affordable housing crisis in the city of Tampa. We are a victim of our own success, but you made quite a few points that make sense. The cost of a parking space, within a parking garage, which is ridiculous. The thing is, not everybody relies on the automobile. People ride bikes, people walk, people want that live, work, play. So if they're living in downtown or on Water Street or in certain neighborhoods, they may want to commute in a different way to work. Car insurance is expensive, gas is expensive, a car payment is expensive. When you allow the developer, by reducing parking minimums and everything that you mentioned, take that burden of cost away. They can apply that to making units affordable, which in turn gets to the goal that we're trying to reach. I'll stop with my comments now. I'll wait until public comment and what my colleagues have to say, but I would certainly be supporting this because you've touched on various points, 50-year housing affordability, the parking, so many things that are needed now, right away. So thank you very much.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
Also, I think this is great, but I'm curious about how we can go further. Yes, 100-unit apartment complex, 100 parking spaces. If that unit or if those apartments are located in a much more dense area, can we encourage less parking? Can we give an incentive for that? I was a little concerned a couple slides back where we were talking about single family. That may be appropriate for further out, but closer to the city center and closer to nodes, just as a gentleman spoke this morning about it, like that's not an appropriate use. So how do we incentivize using housing appropriately? That's a concern of mine. But otherwise, this is great. I'm just concerned that we aren't going to maximize the land in the way it should be. And how do we incentivize that?
Councilman Goods.
That's a great point because everything is in the core. People don't have money to get from A to B. My biggest thing was looking at inclusionary zoning as a part of that. Because if you have more density within, people can get places closer. I talked to Ms. Travis briefly about that, and she said there's a law that changed in reference to that. But I think you have to look at inclusionary zoning because that's going to help you with the inner core. You want to say box people in, but you have more people there that can get where they need to go, less time and affordability. The other question is making sure we've met with developers to make sure that they're on board per se, but making sure we can get our maximized buck of what they really want to make this thing really move. Parking, I've always heard, is a key with the development committee. It's always $30,000 per space. I mean, so I'm just looking at, making sure that whatever our incentives are, what are we going to do, they're in line, because I don't want to put something in place and then there's still pushback. If parking is the issue, which I believe it is one component, I want to make sure all those components are there. That way we don't go back. That way we have everything in place to move. So I think that's the big key. I see a bunch of developers in the room now that are looking, but parking is, I know, is one of the key points they talk about all the time when you talk about affordability with the units. So my thing is inclusionary zoning with those within and the parking.
Councilman Miranda.
Thank you much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate everything you said. However, I like to have some clarity. I was born in Tampa, but my mind thinks like Missouri. You must show me. So what I'm saying is I need a factual sheet of what it costs today in a standard 2-bedroom, 2-bath, or whatever you want to compare it to a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. We're down the line with the 80 or so forth, 140% of the whatever. And then I got to feed what the costs are for all the paperwork and the documentation and the certificates and this understanding of what the developers got to do to get the inspectors to come look at the plan and so forth and so on. You follow what I'm trying to say? And at the end, I want to see what the cost is of this house without any benefits and what's the house. I want to make sure that the people that really need it get it. And I want to make sure that that cost has a great difference between this and this. And I like to see, because what happens is, yes, let's say we have the land and we throw the land in. Then I want to find out exactly what the costs are for that project to succeed, to make sure that the people who really need it get it. And when you start talking about reduction of parking, I'm not afraid of that. I'm not opposed to that. But where I come from, no one had a car. It was Tampa Housing Authority. And you know what? We had a great bus system. Every 15 or 20 minutes you had a bus. You didn't need one. And for the record, more people die in this country of heat than they do of every tornado, hurricanes, or any other natural disaster, and you can go and verify that. So I don't want to see someone get a house and go outside and wait an hour and a half to get a bus, and all of a sudden they lost their life. Those are the things you have to work on, not only for the house, but how are you going to transport the people if you're going to build, and I'm glad that you are. I don't want to, like Miranda said, Miranda's saying, I want a complete operation of transportation. I want a complete of the cost without and with, so that the public can understand where we're going. And as I read this further and furthermore, and I know we're not discussing that yet, but there's a lot of things that come up to a flag of me on page 19, but I won't go there then until we get to that page. So I'm not opposed to anything you said. I agree with it, but we must show the public how it's going to get done. In the old days, you know what would happen? The city would take the task itself and build the houses with their own money and come back to get the money that you have. In other words, the middle person would be cut out to give the person who really needs help the help that they need. In this case, we're not doing that, are we?
This is for private property only. This is not for city property.
I
This is if a private developer has a private piece of land and they are interested in pursuing an affordable housing project with at least 80% of the units affordable.
I appreciate it very much, and I concur with you. I just want to know what the city's doing on the other side when the private developer's not doing it. Is there anyone else doing it other than the private developer?
No, we're not building our own units.
Thank you very much, and I stand true to what I said. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Carlson.
Thank you. Several questions and kind of comments. Number one, your first or second slide showed all the T3 criteria. City Council has been pushing for affordable housing for more than 3 years. I think it would be a sign of collaboration if in presentations we would say, I mean, this was an agenda item City Council put on here, maybe you all initiated it, but it would be better for the public if it looked like we were collaborating on affordable housing instead of, again, working at cross purposes. It's a major initiative of the City Council we've been pushing for a long time. And just saying that it's part of T3 doesn't show collaboration. Number two, you mentioned the 80-20 rule. As I remember it, the West River project was 100% affordable housing, and now it's 20% affordable housing. So it's kind of the opposite, correct?
No, I'm sorry, that's not correct. All of those buildings, the Boulevard, Mary Bethune, those are 80% affordable with a 20% market rate.
But the entire project, not just the affordable housing part of it.
They haven't built anything but affordable to date.
Maybe I remember the wrong project. The Rome Yard project, I think, is similar, that it's 10 or 20% affordable housing, right?
No, it has over 1,000 units and 868 of them are affordable.
But I think some of those are not affordable. They're more like workforce housing, correct? Or
when we say affordable, we mean up to 140% AMI. But West River has a breakdown of less than that. They are not at all at 140, and that is one criteria I would like to work on as we bring this back to you, is that when I say 80%, we don't want those 80% all to be at 140. We would like them to be at differing tiers to ensure that we are getting to each of the income categories.
I think one thing to be clear is we should identify what's affordable housing and what's workforce or other housing. For example, the Tampa Chamber will only support affordable housing. They won't support necessarily workforce housing, as I understand it. And so we just need to, if we say, I mean, we could say 300% of AMI, right? But what is officially designated and what's separate? To me, it would be better to.
Affordable is a defined term under Florida law,
yeah.
and it's I believe it's between 80 and 120% AMI. Is what's deemed to be within affordable.
Yeah. So if we say 140, that's outside of that parameter. So I would just say.
Yes, I sat on the Chamber's Workforce Housing Committee, and you could spend a lot of time differentiating. That's why using the 120 or the 140. The 140 captures what is up to affordable plus a portion of the workforce, but we can definitely look at that and bring that back.
I'm in favor of working on workforce housing. In fact, I've donated money to a project for that. But I think to be clear to the public, we should say what counts as affordable housing and what's outside it. So if we want to add up between 120 and 140 or up to 200 or whatever, that's fine. But we should say like it's two different categories. Next, is there the state statute, what was it, 1339, I forgot the number. is there a specific criteria for what's defined in that?
That is where it does define low, moderate, and
But does it have like,
low, and it gives the AMIs.
and does it up to 120 or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and I know I looked at this a long time ago, but I didn't have it memorized. What other criteria is in there besides the AMI?
It gives you all very, very broad discretion.
Discretion.
It really does. It's supposed to be a tool for local governments to allow for affordable housing that meets the statutory definition of what affordable housing is in virtually anywhere in the city. But it's subject to the local governing body's approval, and what she's bringing forward is a framework for us to kind of try to consider.
I understand that, but my concern, there's two sides of this that we have to answer, because we have lots of people representing different interests in the public. One is a lot of people want affordable housing, workforce housing. We need to solve that issue. The other thing is we have neighborhoods who will feel scared and threatened by this. And so I think the more information we can put out about what's included and what's not would be helpful. One of the concerns from the community is especially with the private housing, which I think we ought to promote more of, is the time limits. How can we pick 50 years instead of a larger number? And are there any other restrictions that we will or could put in these agreements or ordinance?
So right now, many of our programs are 10 years on single family. Some of them then go to 30 years. The state, which funds certain things, are at 99 years. So that's open for discussion. We have not met with stakeholders yet, because I'm not going to take an issue to stakeholders that I know council is not in favor of. So that's why I'm here today, to talk to you about the concept, see where we are. If we are in favor of moving this forward in some capacity, we are then going to go and meet with the developers and the other. We presented this in concept yesterday at the AHAC in the afternoon, which includes several affordable housing developers, and they were in favor of these concepts moving forward. They made a motion to bring to you. So
yeah, we
need to start somewhere, and then we can adjust from there.
Yeah, on one hand, the groups that are interested in protecting people who want affordable housing want the number to be as long as possible. 50 years is better than 20 or 25, which I've heard of before. And the question is, are there any other restrictions that we could put in there? I know the private developers of affordable housing, I talked to a bunch of them, and they felt very frustrated in the past, not necessarily in the last 2 or 3 years, but in the past, that certain developers got preferential treatment. I think you all have been trying to fix that. But we need to make sure that it's open to the public and as many people as possible are allowed to develop this. Are there going to be, will these projects be subject to other code standards, building, construction, to the extent that there's an overlay district, any aesthetics, like if somebody wants to build one in the middle on 7th Avenue, for example, can it look any way it wants, or does it have to meet the barrio conditions, or what's the status of that?
This does not exempt anyone from our design districts if they are located in those design districts. Let me just reiterate, this is for private developers. This is not for RFPs coming to the city. This is if you own 2 acres out on East Columbus and you say, I would like to build affordable housing. I'm going to build 100 units, and 80 of those are going to be affordable.
I understand that, but that's why
it's a specified use that goes in the code that is open to everyone.
That's why there would be a concern. For example, a lot of us spend time in Ybor. If somebody said on 7th Avenue, we're going to build an ultra-modern building that wouldn't fit the barrio guidelines. I just want to make sure, and that's something I'm sure neighborhoods would be concerned about too, whether it would have to meet the aesthetic or other code guidelines. And then last question, I mean, what you're saying is if we pass this ordinance, it'll be an administrative decision similar to downtown. None of these will come before city council.
No, sir, they will all come to you.
They will all come before city council.
They will not come as quasi-judicial hearings like a rezoning. They will come in the form of a development agreement with a site plan. The House bill requires that the governing body approve these. So what we're doing is attempting to create a streamlined process, since this is our priority, yours and ours and everyone in the city, to look at opening up additional lands for affordable housing, a faster process. I mean, when you're approving a project here on a Thursday night, you're not going to see that project for 18 to 24 months by the time it goes to permitting and gets financing and comes out of the ground. And if we can cut down that first period of 9 months by saying, if you comply with these criteria, we're gonna get you up there and we're gonna get you going. That's why we're here today.
Yeah, I would just
You will
ask,
see
in
them.
terms of meeting with the public, we definitely need to meet with developers. We need to accelerate the private sector investments in these things. Private sector also complains about how the housing authority money is kind of a logjam there. They would rather the housing authority not be a developer and just be a distributor of money, because it seems like a limited number of developers get to partner with them. But if we could accelerate the process of getting private sector development, that would be fantastic. But at the same time, I would ask you to meet with the affordable housing constituents and in particular
Councilman Carlson. I believe
the neighborhood
Councilwoman Hurtak has a
associations
question.
also.
Thank you, Councilman Carlson.
I'm happy to make a motion, but I am also interested in Councilman Carlson's point of incentivizing these developers to do more for people in different percentages of AMI. So in coming to us, I would love to see, instead of just saying they're going to be 140%, when these come to us, you know, how many out of each bucket, and how we can incentivize when they're putting affordable housing, not just do 140. What can we do to incentivize them to include parts of each bucket? I believe there's 3 buckets. Am I 3, 4, something in that?
50, 80, and 120
Yeah,
typically.
okay. So yes, but I would love to see what we can do to encourage a little bit of everything.
Understood.
Councilman Vieira.
Thank you very much. And this is something that I think we all support 110%. I always say that when it comes to this issue involving our housing crisis that has seen rental costs and housing costs go up about 1/3 over the last year, we also have $5 gas, almost 10% inflation, that we need to look at what's called emergency care, which I think we're doing with immediate housing assistance for people, but also then long-term solutions. And, these proposals give long-term solutions also involving the private market, because we have to, state the obvious, which is there's a need out there and the market is going to respond to that need, right? There's a need on behalf of the poor, the working poor, the middle class, those working hard to get into the middle class. And we're trying to craft long-term solutions such that the private sector is encouraged to respond to a need and whatnot. We talk a lot about workforce housing versus affordable housing, and for me, we need to have a vision, obviously, for both. And I think we all 110% support that. The folks who are working hard every single day, minimum wage, the CNAs, et cetera, they've been long priced out of the American dream on so many issues involving healthcare, college, housing, et cetera, and it's only getting worse. But you also talk to people. I was at a fire station on Father's Day and talking to some firefighters there who I think start off at about $45,000 a year. For them to break into the city of Tampa area housing market is quickly becoming a lost dream. Not long ago, the city council passed a very robust apprenticeship ordinance. So we talked about people who are becoming welders and electrical workers and carpenters, et cetera. And I would often tell young people, you do this, you can eventually come to earn $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. Those people are being priced out of our housing market. So, we look at the housing market here in the city of Tampa. I don't want Tampa to become Miami in South Florida whenever it comes to pricing out everybody but the upper middle class and upper class. And that's what we're doing here by supporting these ideas, is by encouraging the private sector to respond to the basic needs that are out there in the public, because the private sector is supposed to do that whenever there's, that, and that's what this creates a pathway for. So again, we have to look at, all avenues at supporting people who are being priced out of the market, and then people who have long been priced out of the market, who before were falling 30 miles behind and now we're 300 miles behind, people in the bottom third of our economy. So, this is something that I support, and I thank you all for your hard work on it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Councilman
One
Goode.
shot at this. Mr. Miranda's been here a long time, and I listened to a few things he said earlier. where government was building for the poor. When I look at a business and a private business, they're in it to make money. It's a goal. And that's great. And Ms. Vera said you've got to have all kind of partners working to do what we have to do to make it work. But I'm of the impression that we need the private sector to help, but government has to do its part too. So my thing is, why aren't we building affordable? Why aren't we not building? And I know that's, I see Ms. Travis shaking her head, you know, I see her shaking her head, you know, but I look at the private sector doing what they need to do, we help them as well, but where do we come up to where we build as well? We bond for pipes, we bond for this and that. I mean, housing is an essential need for people right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering, looking at the balance of that, of the private, but also government saying, what are we building to help this crisis as well? Because it's going to take both to do it.
Good morning, Nicole Travis, Administrative Development and Economic Opportunity. And you see me shaking my head because just from experience, and I'm just going to be very candid with you, and you've seen it on government-funded projects. Anytime you put out an RFP and we're the developer and we're building, your price increase at least 33 to 45%. And just as a general rule, local government should not be in the development business because we won't be able to afford it. And I'm not saying that there's not, if we build housing that where it's not going to work for our citizens. It absolutely will. But can we finance our way out of the problem? I don't think so. So instead, what we're doing, and what you have allowed us to do through your budget process, is with using ARPA money, go after privately owned land, acquire that property, and then put it out in RFP and doing housing. Every asset that the city owns right now, we are using and turning it over for affordable housing. That's a way for the private market to work, and that we're not bonding ourselves into something that we can't build our way out of. If we were to bond for a project, your cost will be high and it still won't be enough units. So it's how do you use all these other tools? How do we come alongside the housing authority that is in the housing business? How do we come alongside with them to do the work? So it's not to say that if you were to allocate money right now for us to develop a project that we can't do that. Absolutely we can do that and it would help the citizens. Will it be enough? No. Will it happen fast enough? No. Just because in government time things take longer than they do in private.
We move very slow around here.
It moves faster when it's in the private sector hands to do that, but we can accelerate. And the comments that you all have made, Councilman Carlson, Councilman Hurtak, you were talking about how do we further incentivize, how do we get the different tiers? I think there's absolutely a way for us to do that. Elise and I were talking back and forth on some ideas that we're having as you have conversations. So as we bring this back to you, what you should look at the presentation today and this one, these are low-hanging fruit from a policy perspective as a legislative body that you can take to help accelerate further housing affordability. You've put money to programs. We stood up the call center to try to get through some of the people that have called us. We're doing outreach efforts. But from a legislative perspective, as a legislative body, these are things that you can change to help us accelerate housing affordability. And so with the housing crisis, it's not just pricing, it's also supply and access. And so some of the things that you're seeing in the presentation today is how do we increase that inventory? So long.
I mean, we definitely need the private developers, of course. So my just thing is make sure that we're meeting with them so we can get those incentives we're talking about so we can build, you know?
Absolutely, and you probably might hear some of this from Abby as she goes further in the presentation. We have had developers reach out to us looking at this new House bill, and so we think that if we were to move forward and have an ordinance, we probably have 2 projects that may be ready to come on to take advantage of this. But I agree to Councilman Miranda was talking about no one had a car back then and everybody walked, and being in nodes of transportation corridors. Absolutely, there probably is a way for us to, if you're X number miles or an eighth of a mile or a quarter of a mile, you get even further reduction from parking requirements. So we could definitely work on all of those things to just take it a step further. So the feedback is absolutely helpful for us to shape the draft ordinance that we'll bring back to you after talking to the developers.
Well, that's good, 'cause I see Mr. Stoneberg in the back there, and he's always called with great ideas about how we can move affordable housing, so I'm hoping that he'll be a part of that
Absolutely.
conversation, because he knows housing very well.
Councilman Miranda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate everything that the private developers are going to do under this scenario and have been trying to do. And the affordable housing, even though they have a component of whatever, 10% or whatever it is, that that unit is for such an amount of price, not what the actual price is for the rest of
Correct.
the units. I understand
Absolutely.
that. However, what I want to see in building of housing is that when these things happen, and the cost, again, my mind just wandering around thinking, what if, and what if is this? What is the actual cost to the homeowner, no matter if it's the 80% AMI or 140% AMI of that rental unit or the purchasing of the unit, one or the other makes no difference. At the end of the day, what is going to be the total cost to somebody to get into that unit regarding everything, including the insurance, the cost of electricity? Are those units going to have solar? Are we going to complement some units, give the developers or somebody a price break on how do we could get it so that the cost of living there becomes livable? It may be livable today, but in 6 months from now or a year from now, guess what? The same people we're helping may be out in the street because the components of it are a little different. We have to understand that we're in a crisis today, as you know and I know, everybody knows, I don't have to say that. But what are we doing to reduce the actual cost of living there? Not only in the price of getting in, not only in the price of
But being
paying
able
for
to
you to
stay
be there
there.
monthly. What are we doing in anything to help the environment, help the city, and help the homeowner, and help the developer?
I am confident, based on the feedback that you're giving us, once we go talk to the developers, that we could come up with a tiered approach that allows you to have a base development agreement with a specified use. We get that through the door. But for additional incentives, we'll have things built in. And remember, this is a development agreement that would be coming back to you. So if we have those things built into that development agreement, I'm confident that we can further incentivize projects that,
Even though we're in
Yeah.
a crisis, this is also an opportunity to change something, to make better living conditions for all and save the environment at the same time, and not mark down trees and everything else.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, when working with the developers, and we have some experience in this, that we could share some numbers and give you some general idea or parameters of what we're looking
I
at.
appreciate it very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Any other comments? Councilman Carlson.
30 seconds. What I was saying at the end, in terms of constituents, please don't forget the neighborhood associations. They really need to be a part
Oh,
of
yeah,
this.
for sure.
The other thing, just to respond to Councilmember Goods, I think the city especially is not going to have the resources to build all the units that we need to build. And the housing authority certainly doesn't have it. What we've got to do is take very limited resource of dollar and time and land and leverage the expertise of the private sector. We absolutely have to do that. There have been a lot of obstacles to the private sector developing, and the number one complaint I get, and I've been passing these on to complaints to Nicole, she knows, the number one complaint I get is the lack of consistency through this process. And I know that you're both working to fix that, but in the past and even recently, there have been complaints about decisions being arbitrary and some projects moving faster than others. There's a market timing issue of what's happening in the market and financing and bonding and everything, and we need to make sure we treat the developers, big and small, equally, and that we treat them professionally, that we move projects through correctly, and I know you're working hard to fix that. If we do that, if we just fix those issues along with this, we'll rapidly solve this problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, I would like to take public comment concerning this part of agenda item number 6. Please approach the podium.
Hello, my name is Nathan Hagan. This is probably obvious, but I want to clarify. I'll be able to speak again for other portions of the same item. Okay. I think this is great. Let's see. I I'm supportive. I'm especially interested in what Councilman Hurtek mentioned about, or Councilwoman Hurtek mentioned about parking. I think that we should be talking about eliminating all parking requirements within the walking shed of good bus service routes. So if you're on a route that's in Tampa, that's like half an hour, which is awful, but we'll get there. We should talk about eliminating parking requirements of those. I also think one instant example of where I think this might make a difference is student housing near USF. Students don't need to be driving all around the county. Another great example of people who can get by without one parking unit for every person there. I have some questions about the text that eventually will come out. One is, I'm not sure how mixed use fits in with this. I think it's a question I would appreciate someone asking. I don't know if there's a way we can, if it's even allowed at all, or a way we can incentivize it. Another is, if this is not quasi-judicial, does that mean council can sort of explicitly negotiate with developers on the breakdowns? We're talking about what kind of affordability here. If council's allowed to vote on it and it's not quasi-judicial, I'm interested to see know what that process would look like. And then just musing on the kind of unrelated subject that has come up here on public housing. I just got back from Europe and I learned a lot of interesting things about how they do things there. They do a lot of social housing and it kind of works for them. One thing that I've been floating around that I haven't really gotten any feedback on is the city piggybacking on larger projects. You know, we have the mayor's program where they're giving land away and building one home. You know, what if we went to a project that was building 300 units and you said, what's your marginal cost for 20 more units? And we want to pay for that 20 units beyond what you were going to put the money up for. That's kind of complicated. I don't know if that's been considered, but that's something that's floating in my mind. So thank you for your time.
Is there anybody else in chambers that would like to make public comment to this part of the agenda item?
Hi, my name is Kara Beard. I work with Volunteers of America of Florida, and we are a nonprofit affordable housing developer. I think anything that you guys can do to move the process along faster is helpful. A lot of times, projects or deals are killed because the timing isn't fast enough. We can't move fast enough to get a property ready to say that it is zoned properly when we're going to go after RFAs that Florida Finance Corporation offers. I think that, so anything that she's doing and talking about to move things forward is helpful for us. And when you're doing, I think somebody had said something about being close to a bus stop and things like that. So when developers like ourselves that are going after funding from Florida Finance Corporation, in the RFA, it requires scoring that has to do with how close it is to everything. So I think it's important for you to make sure that you're using your funding to, you know, help projects that are bringing in funding into Tampa. To just give you an example right now, the hugest problem that we're having right now is the cost of construction. So when we bid a project in Mariana recently, it was $5 million. We just got back construction costs and it's $11 million right now. So making things quicker is, we're losing that much money on a project that should have cost us $5 million because the process is slow. So moving things quickly is helpful for the developers. So I'm in support of everything that they're trying to do that.
Thank you. Anyone else in chambers? Is there anyone online?
We had 6 registered speakers and we only have 2 logged on. We have Jean Strohmeyer. If you can hear me, please unmute yourself. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Ms. Strohmeyer.
Hello.
Hi
Can y'all
there.
hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, how are y'all today? Looks like I was looking for my emails for public comment from Suling, and she's got a vacation, lucky her. So I got it. I did get it. Thank you, Mr. Matos. I appreciate that. Anyway, I was just gonna, on its, these issues. I just want y'all to make sure that the public has a chance to brainstorm with everybody, because we think of things that y'all or the city staff do not think about. Here, affordable housing. We need that, but also the way we go about it, make sure that we don't have unintended consequences, because that seems to be a governmental fallout every time. So if we can just kind of brainstorm with the citizens, neighborhood associations, and I didn't get online earlier, so these charging stations and stuff I just wanted to mention that. I know it's not on this issue, I apologize, but You know, every time you charge one of them cars, y'all seen those batteries, the car batteries. They're going to be a landfill nightmare in the future. Just
Ms.
saying.
Stromeyer, that we have continued that part of our
Okay.
agenda.
Well, I missed some of this because I was trying to switch on to the webinar part, and I missed. You know, I just whatever. But I just told you I didn't get my email link until it went from a different. You know, I'm used to Suling being here, and I didn't notice it came from a different email, so it went into my junk. But anyway, I think that's it right now. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else on the line that would like to speak to this?
The last one is Stephanie Pointer. Stephanie, please unmute yourself. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Ms. Pointer.
I only want to say that I support what Nathan contributed. I also want to make sure that our neighborhood associations are consulted. I think that we have really done a lot to support affordable housing. And I would also like to say that in my entire life, I have never been a person who makes 140% of AMI. So that's kind of getting to the top end of it. But have a good, I really wanted to comment on Tampa Heights for the rest of this agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else left online?
That concludes that portion.
Thank you. What is the pleasure of council? Councilman Maniscalco.
Yes, sir, I'd like to make a motion basically transmitting what was presented to us by Ms. Feely and the city staff.
I'll second.
There's a motion made by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilwoman Hurtak. Roll call vote.
Maniscalco,
Yes.
Miranda,
Yes.
Hurtak,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Goods, Vieira,
Yes.
Citro.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously with Goods being absent at vote.
Thank you, council. And I just did want to mention, I believe Nathan mentioned, you know, we continue to evaluate any type of deal we can get into. I am actively pursuing a development opportunity and the city's participation, which would increase by 100 units, that development. So we are looking to partner in that way. We're looking to acquire property. We're looking to do whatever we can do to continue to come at this and partner on the multiple facets that will start to address this issue.
Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
To his point, which, to a commenter's point earlier, that something, you know, we're so focused on affordable housing that I hadn't considered the multi-use aspect. So that would be really interesting. Again, on those notes, but thank you.
I've got that, I've got bike parking, I've got transit proximity, I've been listening intently.
Councilman Miranda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure that the motion is second and the vote was taken, that it includes all of this or just part of this?
No.
Just part.
That was just the
what was
first item.
discussed.
Thank you very much.
We're gonna move on to the second item now.
Councilman
Yes.
Carlson.
In your notes here, aren't you saying that you need a motion for us to put this on the agenda for a future time, or you want us to make one motion to put all of them on the agenda?
I'm looking for, first, if you are in support of the specified use, which it appears that you are, and then we can talk at the conclusion of this when this stuff will come back. We've been asking you, as we conclude these workshops each quarter, for that next date, which I'm looking at either September or October. October would be best, but I am gonna set up meetings now with Dan. I am gonna set up meetings with the other stakeholders and start molding this to come back to you.
Yeah, because all we did is we voted to receive and file, so I think or transmit, so we need to, at the end of this, we do need to.
And that's what we'll be doing, Mr.
And
Massey.
I think that's what she's looking for, are motions from this body that you're supportive of what she is